Sheeman, who you'll hear from in just a bit. You could not have had a better presenter prior to us for talking about streams and history of streams and why you're doing the research you're doing. Because part of the reason that we did the economic survey of the Little Miami River is for the protection of the river and trying to help folks understand that it's important to leave the rivers alone and let them expand and contract and go where they feel they need to go rather than where we think they need to go. Let me give you a little bit of background on our organization and the river, and then we'll get into the economic study. Here we go. The river itself, and I'm not going to read all these. You are more than welcome to read them as I talk. The river itself is 115 miles long. It was the first state and national scenic river in the state of Ohio, and it runs from the Springfield, South Charleston area all the way down to the Ohio River. And a little different from what folks know, but it never touches the Great Miami. The Little Miami is not a tributary for the Great Miami River. There is about 3 million people that live within an hour's drive of the Little Miami River. So there are a number of folks that enjoy this waterway. Our organization was created about 12 years ago by Hope and some of her neighbors who realized that the Little Miami River didn't have anybody speaking for it, that there were some things happening in the river, things like erosion and sedimentation and a lot of pollution, and that it needed a voice for somebody to help protect the river. And the organization, what did I touch? Yeah, that's going to be hard to look at.
Sorry for the technical.
Right? It happens. And we've done this without this PowerPoint, so
No, I
we
didn't.
have to be.
I'll switch out the tables in a second here.
Okay.
We're still just going through the times.
Can I ask a question during the technical?
Sure.
Is there something called the Little Miami Conservancy too?
Yes.
And how is that different, or what
How is
is
that different? The Little Miami Conservancy is based out of the Loveland area, and they deal with predominantly the lower half of the river. Although we do kind of intermingle, but the majority of their work is done on the lower half of the river. We deal with the upper 43 mile, and
Okay.
they deal with from there down.
Okay.
Not that there's anything that says we can't intermingle, it's just that's kind of how it is.
Okay.
The river, if you've ever canoed or kayaked on the Little Miami, you'll know that once you get south of the Waynesville-Corwin area, the river changes dramatically. The upper half of the river is relatively narrow. There are a lot of gorges, a lot of trees, a lot of agriculture along the area. And then once you get south of the Waynesville area, the river flattens out, it widens out, and you get more into a public, more of an urban setting. So if you didn't know better, you would think it was two different rivers. Our organization is involved with projects such as river cleanups. We do a river cleanup every June. We've taken out our 1,000th tire out of the river, which we aren't proud to say, but we are proud to say that we've taken it out of the river. We do tributary cleanups. We aren't just for the Little Miami itself. We deal with the tributaries also. We work with education programs like this. We do, scout groups and festivals and fairs and those kinds of things. And you don't have to fuss with it. If you can't get it, I can, oh, there comes Katie.
I am moving it back.
He almost wants to keep it moving. That was work. We have spent the last 4 months doing doing presentations like this for organizations all up and down the river, predominantly governmental organizations. There we go. Hey, we lost a little bit on the edge, but that's okay.
It's not flashing.
It's not flashing too good. Yeah, I can add in what's not there. And talking with county commissioners and township people, zoning and planning folks, private citizens, just to get them to understand the value of the Little Miami River. Let me backtrack a little now that we have our technical back and tell you a little bit about the recreational study. As most organizations, we do a lot of festivals and fairs and kind of promoting our organization. And one of the things that we were finding when we were out doing festivals and talking predominantly with governmental folks is the question kept coming up of, what is that river worth? Well, it's an interesting question, because to us, the river's great. It's great for canoeing and that fishing he was talking about, and going kayaking and spending our leisure time. But that wasn't the question. That worth was not the internal worth, it was the dollar value worth. And how do you put a dollar value on a piece of recreation or river itself? Well, through the help of Ohio State University, who was already doing this kind of work, we worked with a professor named Dr. Brent Songen. He's with the Department of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences. And he had already done a survey for the ODNR areas and reserves about what the environmental impact was and what the value was on or from these areas and reserve sites. So Hope and Bill, who you will hear from in a moment, worked with Dr. Songen to put together a survey. It was a two-part survey. The first part of the survey was an easy answer questionnaire that you got through a QR code or a website. And it asks you some very simple questions. What's your zip code? Why do you go to the river? What do you do when you get there? How long do you stay? Those kinds of questions. Then if you were willing to, you could go on and answer a longer in-depth survey. The original survey was to be done the year that COVID hit. And we opted not to do it that year. We had no idea what kind of results we would get. So we opted to put it off a year. We picked 45 sites along the river, starting at Baby Station, which is Springfield, and going all the way south to just south of Waynesville to Oregonia. The sites were chosen because they were either right along the river itself, or they were bike path sites that are along the bike path, that the bike path could take you to the river. 24 volunteers helped us for 7 months. We began in April, we ended in October. That into itself is a miracle, trying to get 24 volunteers to stay with you for 7 months is tough. They were all very dedicated to the survey and to the river itself. 10,000 surveys were given out, and surprisingly, we got a 17% return rate. Now that doesn't sound very high, but when was the last time you stood around and answered a survey? You probably skirted it. You probably walked the other way when somebody came and asked you questions. Well, that's why we didn't do it that way. Our volunteers would go 3 days a week, once on the weekend, twice during the week, to their assigned sites. They would pull into the parking lot, whether it's along the river or along the bike path. They would count the number of cars in the site, and then they would leave an informational sheet on each one of the vehicles. The majority of us are technically savvy, so we could take a shot of that QR code or type in the website and answer those first questions relatively easily without ever leaving the parking lot. That's why we got such a huge return rate on it. We found that there were 836,000 trips being placed to these 45 sites along the Little Miami River. Now, when I say trips, remember that is not individual people. That is cars. So that could be one person in a car or 5 people in a car. It's a lot of folks visiting the site. We found that we had people coming from as far away as Warren, Ohio, which if you're not familiar with Warren, that's up near Cleveland. 43 different counties were visiting the upper half of the Little Miami River. I was asked why we didn't survey the whole 115 miles of the river. Well, that's pretty daunting. And I joked about the fact that if Hope would have asked me to survey 115 miles, I'd have flat out told her no, because there's no way we could have done that. And we wanted to get a true, accurate survey, so we wanted to make it manageable. The sites I have listed here, they included 1 in Springfield, 3 in Clifton, they're familiar with Clifton Gorge. John Ryan has 9 sites. Glen Helen has 3. Yellow Springs is some of the highest visited of all the sites. Xenia, Beaver Creek, Sugar Creek Township, Spring Valley and Spring Valley Township, Waynesville and Corwin, and then Oregon. We did not go as far south as Loveland, simply because Loveland is a huge community, not in the number of people or size, but the amount of people that come to utilize the river and the bike path in Loveland is a survey all into itself. And a recreational impact value came of this, and I'm gonna let Bill explain to you how we came up with that dollar amount. But sit there and look at that for just a moment. $14.9 million is estimated in the recreational value of the upper 43 mile of the Little Miami. Bill, you want to explain to them how we derived that number?
Yep, the word that's not on that slide is annual. At least I can't say it probably kind of right. So just
Per year.
okay, per year. You're right, annual's not only the per year.
You're right, it is not.
So we expected it was a lot higher than what other people thought it was. When Cris started making her opening comment, she said, "What's it worth? What's it worth? What's it worth?" And that's what we always heard from elected officials, appointed officials, when we go out and talk about you need to protect the river, you need to protect the floodplain, you need to plant more trees along the river. You know, they always want to drill down to dollars and cents. And we found out that there was a method to do that. Ohio State and a number of other universities were already calculating something called consumer surplus. And if you've studied economics, you've heard of it, but I've never really heard of it until we got into this study. I mean, it's a way to value something beyond the direct spending. So for 50 or 100 years, we always tried to get our hands around how much food, how much gasoline, what is the direct spending piece associated with the natural resource or park. So, you know, we find out how much beer and wine and pop and candy and worms and tackle are sold. But everybody that used that piece of nature, that asset, knew it was worth more than that. And Cris mentioned the zip code. Once these databases, public databases, became more accessible and computers got stronger, we could start calculating things like average household income in a zip code. And once we calculate average household income in a zip code, then we could find out from like the home improvement companies, like, you know, Home Depot and all the big box stores that will leave those out, you know, how much revenue are they driving in their stores there? How much are the restaurants in that area doing? How much are the movie theaters in the area doing? And you look at where consumers have the choice to spend their money. When they go to a asset like the Little Miami River, that's the same kind of choice. And you can begin to model that the consumer surplus number that way. And definition of consumer surplus is basically, it's the excess social value above what a person has to pay to utilize the asset. So these are the things that attract people to certain areas of the country to live. I mean, one of the obvious examples, you look out in Colorado and you're on the front range and you see the Rocky Mountains. That value, the viewscape, the value of that viewscape has huge consumer surplus. The value of Little Miami for fishing, kayaking, just hiking along, viewing nature. They use these economic tools to now value it. Of that 14.9 million, about 2/3 is consumer surplus. 1/3 is direct spending on an annual basis. So it's a widely accepted principle, academic principle. All the major universities are jumping on the bandwagon in the last decade or two doing these studies. Ohio State's done several. Kind of the turning point was when we had the Deepwater Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, and they were trying to hold the drilling companies and the supply companies accountable. They tried to wrap their arm around the whole economic impact. How much tourism was lost by people who used to go down there who weren't going to go down there anymore? How many wedding planners weren't doing weddings on the beaches anymore, even if there wasn't sludge in there? And using the consumer surplus calculation, it came up with about $21 billion worth of consumer surplus damage that was done up there. And drilling companies and the suppliers wrote the check. So it's kind of a turning point for this type of calculation, but now it's a normal part of calculation. Does anybody have any questions before she drags them out the shoulder? And I fished 4 Mile Creek. My dad loved to fish it. He dragged me over there when I couldn't swim, and I had to pick up all these shark's teeth along the stream. And later, when I studied geology, I found out they were horn coral, not shark's teeth from the Ordovician. I found out they were really cool Ordovician fossils. Thanks.
So if we had to charge you for using Little Miami, or using any recreation area, that's kind of what a recreational value is. You know, it's the amount of dollars that you would spend plus what it would be worth for you to have this available to you. 14.9 million for the upper 43 miles. And because we have done a number of talks for other groups, I have broken it all down by community. So if you live in any of these communities or are familiar with any of these communities, it might give you a better idea of what the recreation value is. Greene County, you had 36 sites at about $12 million. Of course, that is the biggest amount simply because we had the most sites in Greene County. Clark County had the smallest, but we only had 1 site in Clark County. And Warren County had 96,000. I'm sure if we would have gone further down the Little Miami River, those numbers would be right there along Loveland, and then it would fluctuate also with the community. If you would break the river down river mile by river mile, of the 43 miles, recreation generates about $346,500 per mile per year in benefits. So think about that the next time you canoe or you kayak, the value of that river. And why did we do this? The results were astounding. I would never have guessed it was 14.9 million, nor would I have guessed there were over 800 visitors. Well, we did this because we knew that the Little Miami was an asset, but we wanted to get other folks engaged, and we wanted other folks to understand why this river is so important and why we need to stop changing it and moving it and building so much around it. When we go to talk with zoning and planning, when we go to talk to governmental officials, we have to talk about the fact that This river is bringing in young people to our community. It's retaining future generations. It's giving us a workforce. It's giving us an environment that people want to live in and work in. And that is some of the trash from so far. And now more than ever, we've got to speak for this river and all of our waterways. Simply due to the fact that there's so much pressure, and what did we just pass the, 8 billion person mark in the planet? I think we're right at it or right near it. Awful lot of folks within our community. Things I can tell you about the study, survey, why we did it, how we did it. The complete survey is on our website. So if you go to Little Miami Watershed Network, lmwn.org, you can see that complete survey, all of the breakdowns. We do have a handout here that's got some information, kind of the basics on it, plus our website information that can help you also. Anything else we can tell you? That would be way easy. Thank you. Thank you for letting us, yes.
So, this different economics. What about real estate value for all those places that are near on the watershed?
You
and
are
the
a
tax-
great question.
And the tax base that generates.
You sucked us in, and now you're gonna stick us out too. I like it. We did not include it.
Yeah.
The tax base, the real estate tax base is not included in this.
Yeah.
We did include things like the canoe liveries. We did not include any of the home real estate, business real estate in this. So of course that would generate and make that much higher.
And it's gonna be huge. Ohio State is working on that right now.
Okay.
It requires a different type of, it's actually calculus, hedonic calculus. And they're getting close to issuing, it's kind of a follow-up piece to our report. And Little Miami is exceptionally beautiful. It's a lot different than the Great Miami. If you look at the development that's gone on along it, these very expensive real estate developments.
Yeah.
And so that's coming, but we know it's a huge number. And so important to the municipalities. I mean, you know, you gotta keep the snow removal going and water delivered and everything. So that's critical to local government.
But one of the reasons we wanted to do this is so that we could convince government not to let people build too close to it.
Yep.
To protect the floodplains, to protect the river, the riparian way, so that it had a better chance to stay pristine and pretty. Because if it degrades, then people are not gonna wanna come to it, they're not gonna wanna live next to it. And recreational visitors are the best kind to have, because they, supply schools or even big infrastructure things to get them to come.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.